This podcast is not sponsored or supported by any business or organization. The views reflected on these podcast episodes are my own. Please be aware I am not a medical expert, travel agent, or any other kind of expert. Hey everyone, welcome to the Eat, Explore, Love podcast. I'm Ashley. This podcast is based off of my blog of the same name, Eat, Explore, Love. It talks about the unique challenges in traveling around the world when you have celiac disease. Due to sort of popular demand, I decided to also record a podcast to delve a little deeper into my travels and the lessons learned along the way. Hi everyone, welcome to a new episode of Eat, Explore, Love, the podcast. So, as we can already see, we're starting to take Eat, Explore, Love, the podcast in a different direction. And I felt like we've, gotten in hot with April with a lot of changes, a lot of different amazing interviews. So, this kind of leads us perfectly into the month of May, which is Celiac Disease Awareness Month. So, of course, this whole podcast started off as a blog. And the blog started off as an idea many years ago where I found it very difficult to figure out where the best places to eat for someone that has a gluten allergy, like myself, like many others. It was people that had blogs. That's where I went to. Those were more trustworthy than just a general gluten search on Google, and that still is the case. So I wanted to figure out what could I bring to the table that might be different than somebody else. And of course, ultimately, because I am me and I am unique, just like every person is unique, inevitably, whatever I did was going to be different because I am different from others. My journey, my experience, my whatever. And that brought about Eat, Explore, Love, the blog. And I had some family members tell me, it's very difficult for me to read about your travels. Could you put it verbally? And that brought the podcast. So this all really started because of me having celiac and me wanting to provide people a resource for others with celiac. So I'm starting to get back to the idea of this being a resource for others with celiac. I'm getting back to the root of this not just being about travels, but about self-love and the lessons I learn along the way. And my perspective is unique because I've had to go through the world of being diagnosed from a really young age in a way that changed my entire life as I knew it. Celiac Disease Awareness Month is to bring awareness, and I'm choosing it to celebrate celiac disease. I would probably be offended if I were someone listening and being like, what is there to celebrate about having celiac disease? But I'm trying this new thing where I turn negatives into positives. Celiac disease is becoming more widely known, more people are becoming aware of it. It's a less isolating experience now than it was when I was first diagnosed nearly 15 years ago. So, with all that in mind, there's so many people in my life that have asked me, I feel X, Y, and Z symptoms. What caused you to be diagnosed with celiac? And my sister and I have gone on celiac cruises. I'm part of celiac support groups on social media platforms. And my story is very unique in that I was diagnosed by mistake. I was not shown any symptoms or I was not presenting any symptoms. It came seemingly out of nowhere. I had never even heard of a gluten allergy or celiac disease. All that I was aware of were peanut allergies and things like that. So I decided the first episode of Celiac Disease Awareness Month, and I have many other interviews coming that are going to be way more interesting, but I figured it was good to start off with my celiac story. And I think that there are a lot of lessons to be learned in my celiac story because my celiac story doesn't end with being diagnosed with celiac and then eating gluten-free and then that's it. So I think advocacy for yourself, or if you're a parent, the importance of trusting your gut when you feel that something is wrong with yourself or with your child, and really, saying to the doctors, just give my child or give me the test. What is the worst that can happen? And that is a theme of it has never proven to be a bad thing for me to do that in my celiac story. And hopefully, these stories and these twists and turns that I'm about to share help somebody else feel emboldened, or maybe there are times where I listen to other people's stories and they bring up something that I haven't thought about before of a way to communicate something with the doctor that makes it different. My story begins, I guess, when I was a baby. I always, my mother tells me I always had bathroom problems. And I'm sorry, there's going to be some potty talk in this podcast. It won't get too graphic. And if you don't like even the slightest hearing of it, then maybe this isn't the podcast episode for you. Maybe you don't listen to hearing celiac stories, but because so much of it revolves around the intestinal tract. So therefore, there's going to be some of that talk. But apparently, when I was younger, I had a lot of really horrible issues with going to the bathroom. My mother would say to the pediatrician, I don't find this to be normal, what I'm watching my baby, my toddler, my child experiencing. I have no recollection. I guess it had sorted itself out to a degree enough where I don't remember that as being part of my childhood, but it happened to a degree when I was a baby and a toddler that it did traumatize my mother and my grandmother because they still tell me stories about that time. And the pediatrician very much blew her off of, you're a mom, mothers worry, there's no need to worry. This is something that happens. Blew her off. She never thought, she kind of trusted the doctors. I think similar things happened with my other siblings. She brought it to their attention again, and they said, perhaps it's just in the genetics where you guys just have little tummy issues and, they'll work themselves out. And I guess because to a certain degree I did work myself out, I wonder if that caused my mother to trust. My mother also was My father worked a ton when I was growing up, which caused my mom to kind of live this single mother life. So she had a lot of children, one with a disability. Her hands were full. So I don't begrudge her at all. I do begrudge the doctors that didn't take her mother's instinct a little bit more seriously, or, didn't investigate it a little bit more to make sure that everything was okay. Now, with all of that said, this was a long time ago. Chances are, even if the doctors did investigate, they wouldn't have had the tests to be able to know anything about it. So, cut to, I'm in high school, dealing with a lot emotionally. I did not take to the onslaught of puberty emotions very well. I didn't take well to being a kid. I didn't take well to being a human being in my age group at all, ever. And if my mother was, dealing with a lot when I was a baby, she was definitely dealing with a lot with me as a teenager. My brother, there were, he has an autism diagnosis. A lot of her energy was focused on him. Again, I don't begrudge her for it. Of course, the energy was going to be focused on him. Because of my mother's great advocacy for my brother, is how a lot of, autistic children in my school district got a lot of the services that they needed, that they weren't just shoved aside. um, is the reason why my brother is the amazing man that he is today, is the reason why we did eventually get diagnosed with celiac, was because of the great advocacy work that she was able to put toward my brother. So my brother, I was 14 at the time, he was 13. We're Irish twins, we're very close in age. He stopped registering on the growth chart. Now, my family were not exactly from the Jolly Green Giants. Both sets of, I never got to meet my grandfather, and we never really talk about his height. My paternal grandfather, he's the only one I don't know. But the remaining grandparents that are luckily still with us today, they're all very tiny, short people. A lot of my cousins, for the most part, are very short. There's only one or two exceptions where they have reached near 6 feet. Uh, and my parents, especially, are not. They would be average. My father, perhaps on the shorter side of average. Now, I was short, but no one was overly concerned about me being short because, the genetic of everything I just explained. With my brother, he stopped registering on the growth chart to the point where they were very concerned. He should have had a growth spurt at this point, in the pediatrician's opinion. They were doing all these tests on him, wondering why he was as tiny as he was, if it was something that it was just genetics or if there was something else going on. And the pediatrician said to my mother, there's this thing that is popping up with some people lately, celiac disease, and it seems to be something we're seeing a lot in people. Let's just add that onto the list of things that we're going to test him for while he's already getting the blood work done. What's one more test? My brother turned up positive for celiac disease. And if you know anything about celiac disease, it potentially stunts your growth. And I remember when the doctor did that thing of predicting how tall I would be, I never reached the height that he said. I'm 5 foot 1 3/4 officially, 5'2" on a good day. I know my mother doesn't like to believe that, but the doctor did measure me, and that is my height the last time I was properly measured by doctors. I am fully believing, and I tease my mom all the time whenever she tries to make fun of my height of, well, if you loved me more and advocated for me more, maybe I would have had a couple more inches on me. Which is not very nice, but whatever. So the pediatrician explained to my mother, celiac disease, it is genetic, so I recommend everybody in the family get tested. I'm one of four children. 3 out of the four of us ended up with celiac disease. We had the same results in our blood work. My mother had the markers for it. I don't believe my father ever got tested. I was at this point turning 15 in a few weeks. My brother, again, autistic, 13, a month away from turning 14. My sister was 4 years younger than me. She still is 4 years younger than me. So if I was 14 turning 15, she was probably 10 turning 11. So she was very, very little. And we think that her celiac got triggered because usually it's you have the markers for it and different things trigger it to be activated. Or at least that's how it was explained to us at the time. And we think my sister was usually it's puberty, apparently, or it could get triggered if a woman gets pregnant. She could go her whole life being totally fine, and then she deals with the hormones of getting pregnant, and then all of a sudden she is getting that celiac diagnosis. So my mother has the markers for it. If something triggers in her body, her celiac, she she would then be formally diagnosed with celiac disease. I'm not a medical expert, but that's how it was explained to us. And I hope to have a medical expert on one day for me to question that person about that and see what the truth is with all of that. But anyway, that's how it was explained to us at the time. And because of the age that I was and that I didn't have a disability, because back then celiac wasn't a disability, um, they felt that because all of our blood work results were the same, that only one person needed to get the endoscopy because likely the results would be the same for all of us. And they could officially just say, yep, just got celiac. So all of you have to be gluten free. And they think my sister was, sorry, the point of me saying this, my sister is 10 or 11, which is usually pretty young with being notified of a celiac diagnosis. And they think because she was a competitive gymnast, she was number one in the state for I think it was performing on the beam. She was quite good, but the stress that put on her body perhaps is what caused it to have a full celiac disease prognosis at that time, and rather than her potentially having the markers and just sitting and waiting for it to become more of a thing. Again, how it was explained to us at the time, more science could have come out since then of better helping differentiate it. I'm not 100% certain. If someone does know and be willing to talk about it, I would love to hear from them. So I was the only one that got the endoscopy at age pretty much 15 at that point, and they saw right away in the endoscopy. And endoscopy is, you basically, it's a tube with a camera at the end of it, and it goes down your throat. And celiac disease is essentially in your intestines, there's little hairs that stick up and grab the nutrients from your food as you're digesting it. And that's how your body gets the nutrients. It's how you get big and strong and healthy and get your weight on and all that other stuff. And all of us were very emaciated looking. We all had dark circles around our eyes, very pale, very skinny. We were very underweight. But again, our genetics, we thought it just had something to do with that. Um, and It was turned out all of the little hairs in the intestines were completely flat. They saw it right in the endoscopy. They did take the biopsy, and they're like, I don't even need to wait for the results. Just by even what I saw in her intestines, she's got celiac. So that means all of your children have celiac. And that is when our life forever changed. Now, they said it was going to take 6 months to a year for us to really start seeing the impact of being on this gluten-free diet, that our body had to repair itself. So the dark circles around our eyes went away. My brother skyrocketed in his health. His behavior even changed. He was able to handle things a little bit better. Um, my sister started looking healthier and plump and pink, meaning plump, as far as a stick figure, having some life to her. They both, and she has grown, and she's not super tall, even with being gluten free, but she's closer to average than I am. She's got a few inches on me. And when I started being gluten free, that is when everything changed for me for the worst. I was in so much pain all the time. I had, I was noticing more bathroom issues actually more frequently. Um, I felt really tired all the time. I just did not feel good. And I was 15 and I felt like I should have been 80. And we kept going to the pediatric gastroenterologist, and I kept trying to talk to other people and other family members, and people weren't really taking me seriously. They were like, nope, nope, there's nothing else. It's just the celiac, so you're fine. And maybe you perhaps have IBS too, and that's just that, and it is what it is. And I figured, okay, I guess it is what it is. And it took up until through college, I had a couple of accidents where I would eat out with friends. I would or not even eat out. I would be super careful about being gluten free, and something would happen where I would essentially be going to the bathroom on myself. I wouldn't be able to make it to the bathroom, and I would have an accident. And it was, if you're a teenager or even in your early years of college, even as a full on adult, that is a humiliating experience of having to call up a friend and say, do you happen to have a change of clothes on you? Because I just had a bad accident. And I'm very fortunate that I've had some pretty great people in my life. And I did not like going out with my friends. I only would go out with my partner at the time in college. When people were inviting me out, I would only go out with my partner because if I needed to go, like that he could help me. Um, I kind of turned in on myself over the years because I just didn't have the confidence or the desire to want to go out and have to explain, because I lived far away from everybody too, from New York. Everybody was going to Manhattan. I lived all the way out on Long Island, but not in the closer parts. It took like a full hour and a half by train for me to get into the city. So if I wasn't feeling too great, an hour and a half or even a half an hour train ride would not have been okay to have to navigate. So I think a lot of people took it personally, and friends stopped speaking to me because I just didn't want to go out. I was willing to have everybody come to me, where if something happened, I could easily go to the bathroom. That would be fine, but I didn't want to go out. Um, And again, all the while bringing things up to doctors that this doesn't feel normal. I'm feeling intense pain in my stomach, kept being blown off. I then had a job, was working really intense hours, and I'm very thankful for that job. I loved the job. I loved who I worked with. I loved what I was doing and learning. But by the end, I just couldn't function. And I went to the doctors. I tried a new doctor and I said, I need help. I need you to help me. I know my body. I know something is wrong. I can't, it's, I can barely stay awake. I am in a ton of pain and I'm having a significant ton of bathroom problems. I'm starting to feel nauseous all the time. I'm seeing nutritionists, and being on a gluten-free diet is simply not helping. I need help. And I finally found this amazing female gastroenterologist, and she took me seriously. And she said, I believe you. And she said, let's get you an endoscopy and let's do a colonoscopy. And so we did that. And she saw a big mess in my system. She said, you are going to need to change your lifestyle again. I needed to put myself in low stressful situations. I needed to see a nutritionist that she worked with, because she thought this was only the beginning of what we were going to uncover. I then, and also, by the by, she was moving in a few weeks. So she handed me over to her partner. She's moving out of state. So she handed me over to her partner, who was great. And he sent me for some more additional testing. It turned out, yes, I had IBS. They gave me medications for it. They were like, let's try this for 6 months. Let's meet back here. 6 months later, they put me in for another endoscopy and colonoscopy, because I was still saying, I'm getting better. The pain's no longer there. I'm starting to become a little bit more lively and functional, but I'm even more nauseous than I was when I first came to you. And so hence they put me in for the other colonoscopy and endoscopy. They said they found some stuff. I ate particularly late in the night that time. I was like, all right, so I'm not, to make the next day a little bit easier, I think I ate something at like 11 o'clock, or I ate at the last possible moment. When you have an endoscopy, you can eat up until midnight the day of, and when you have a colonoscopy, I think it's like 48 hours or something. So I ate up until the last possible moment, which was something different than I did the time before. And I went back to the doctor, got the test done, and my mother said that I was in the procedure room getting, the endoscopy and colonoscopy done for way longer than I usually have in the past. And so the doctor came out after, and I was very lucid actually after this time. And the doctor was like, hey, just out of curiosity, did you eat before coming here? I said, I did not eat before coming here. And he's like, we had to get a lot of stuff out of your stomach this time around. So he said, I'm going to send you for another test. I ended up having to go to a radiology center. I had to eat radioactive eggs, scrambled eggs, and they basically tracked my digestion through, to see how long. And basically, what they found was at the end of the 4 hour period, your stomach should be functioning at between 0 and 10%. And mine was functioning at 90%. And based on those test results, they came to the conclusion that I have a condition called gastroparesis. And gastroparesis basically means, again, I'm not a medical expert, so apologies if you are a medical expert. I'd be happy to talk to somebody on this podcast to break it down in what the more official language is. But the way that they dumbed it down for me enough to understand is that my stomach cannot break things down. So that meant I couldn't have salads, I couldn't have meats, I couldn't have vegetables unless they were cooked. It limited my diet even more. And it became dairy products I had to be careful with. And, that was all that. So then went back to the doctor. There were some other dramas as far as like the doctors in the uh in the uh office that I was going to, and eventually landed on one that I had a really good rapport and relationship with, and we got really to the bottom of what was going on, because then we did the gastroparesis, but I was still having a lot of bathroom issues, and so they gave me medications to help with the IBS, but that backed up my system a little bit too much that it ended up causing issues with the gastroparesis. So that was a new game that we had to play, of figuring out what medications could help me, because if my gastroparesis acted up too much, they found that's what was causing my nausea. And if I took medication to help alleviate the IBS, I couldn't function. I would be way too nauseous to experience life. They really, my doctor and I came to the agreement of, we need to fix the gastroparesis symptoms. And once we fix that, let's hope that the IBS stuff, but the IBS has to come secondary. And that's ended up how it worked. As long as I manage, and with all of this, I was like, because they were concerned of the still bathroom issues, they tested me for other intolerances, and I have intolerances to sorbitol, which is a sugar that you could find in toothpaste, in gum, in apples, other fruits. Had an intolerance to lactose, so, dairy products, of course, and sucrose was another one. And I don't know what sucrose is in, but that, because it was like the test results were, and I was like, whoa, is the other one. So I didn't pay as much attention. It became a lot of experimenting and writing in food journals and figuring out, okay, when I eat this, this makes me feel this way. So I have found I can have ice cream. It doesn't bother me. If I have certain types of ice cream, like certain brands will bother me more than other brands, but I didn't have to give that up. Cheese doesn't bother me at all, but I couldn't have whole milk because that has higher fat. I had to switch to almond milk. I felt a lot better. I had to change the cereal I was eating because gluten-free Cheerios I was having, and the number one ingredient in Cheerios, or one of the first top ones, sorbitol. So I had to stop having sorbitol. I had to change out my toothpaste. I stopped eating apples. That alleviated so much. And then focusing on my gastroparesis diet. So instead of eating meats, I eat a lot of fish. So I started to fall in love with eating fish, which was great. And I've learned, okay, I just need to be careful. And I've gotten to really know my stomach really well. I also have to be careful about how much I eat. So if you are having large portions, it's taking your stomach a long time to break it down, which means I'm going to get nauseous. So, for example, my sister and I went on a celiac cruise, and I everything was gluten free, and I don't have to worry as much about my intolerances. So I went, full. I had as much as I could. My eyes were definitely bigger than my stomach on that trip, and I felt horrible. And it turned out it was because I was eating way too much, and my body didn't have a chance to break it all down. So I made myself sick. So I'm going on another celiac cruise this year, and I have to be super careful about how much I eat. As good as and great as the food is, I have to be careful of the quantity. So although my sister and my brother, when they started eating gluten free, they felt healthier, they feel great, they've fixed the issues that were happening with their health. For me, it was just the beginning of my journey. And I know that there are a lot of other people that have it way worse than I do. There are people that end up in the hospital. They were concerned with me at one point that I had a type of celiac that was not responding well to the gluten-free diet, which if I had that, they wouldn't even tell me what that would mean for my life, because it would be too much apparently for me to be able to emotionally handle at that point in time. So they wanted to wait until I needed to worry about it. So I think it's don't be afraid if your insurance allows you to, if your doctor is not giving you the information that you need and not giving you the time of day or respect that you deserve, go find another doctor until you find that doctor that's going to listen to you, because the worst thing that happens is they run those tests and they find that, or you know, they find nothing out. Or they find something and it might not even be what you expected. And as long as sometimes it's just the peace of mind, and sometimes just being able to put a name to what you're experiencing, it just does a whole lot of wonders. And I really empathize with people that were in a ton of pain and dealing with a lot, and it took them so many years. Mine kind of went before their celiac diagnosis, and then their celiac is like, yes, it's the beginning of them getting a whole bunch of other diagnoses, but at least it alleviates some pain for them. I feel sorry for that being the case. I don't know what's worse, of feeling fine and the diagnosis coming out of nowhere and then experiencing all this pain as a result, or the other way around. But I think it all just stinks. I would love to be in a world where doctors start just listening to their patients, because I think it's not about, yes, there's a matter of, I'm hearing you saying the symptoms. I don't think that's what you have. I think this is how we can navigate this and move forward, versus what my mother experienced and what I've experienced of, not what it is, don't worry about it. It's just probably it's probably just genetics, whatever. And blowing us off as if the pain we were feeling. And I had a doctor tell me, because I was in college, and they said, well, do you have any stress? And I said, yes. And they said, well, stop stressing. What could you possibly have to stress about? You're just in college. You don't have bills to pay. You don't have any expenses. You don't have children to take care of. And I think, that was the biggest slap in the face possible. So I think it's very frustrating when you know your body and you know something is wrong, and you're trying to get people to listen, and it's not a gender thing. I know I mentioned that it was a female doctor that finally listened, and it's really been my female doctors that have been the ones that have really been like, all right, I'm going to sit and we're going to go through your list of questions and we're going to figure out a path forward from here. But I've also had some male doctors that have been responsive in that way as well. And I've also had some female doctors that are also not so great. So I don't want to make this a gender thing. And I'm sorry that I kind of did already. But I do think you have to be professional in your tone and not yelling at them. I appreciate it. You're the fifth doctor I have seen, and I wouldn't be seeing this many doctors if I didn't know something was wrong, if I thought it was just something as simple as blank. And sometimes they're more responsive to that. So I feel you if this is just the beginning of your journey and you're trying to figure out what's wrong and you're feeling poorly. And I'm so sorry. And I'm sorry if this podcast doesn't provide any further insights for you as far as a celiac potential diagnosis or any other kind of diagnosis. And of course, I'm always free to be a listening ear to friends and family if they've got something going wrong on. And I've helped out some friends where I'm like, well, maybe you should ask the question this way. And I've helped my friends learn how to advocate for themselves. And even my grandparents, where I'm like, well, maybe you should ask the question this way, and maybe that's going to get them the answer so that you need. They're like, oh, that's a really good idea, or that's a valid point. And then they do get the answers that they need. So sometimes it's even about just asking the right question in the right way for them to be receptive or perk up to whatever you're talking about. So that's my celiac diagnosis story. It's been 15 years about, not quite. I realize I just gave away my age, kind of. The math I'm giving you here, but that's okay. It's been a really long journey. It's only been the last 2 years where I've really known how to function as a human being. I will say a symptom of having celiac is you're going to be more tired than the average person. It's just one of the symptoms. So that hasn't gone away. And I wish I could tell other people it gets better, but that didn't get better for me. and it didn't get better for my sister. I'm jealous of how well she sleeps. But that's pretty much it. I hope this is a helpful resource. This is only the beginning, folks, of Celiac Disease Awareness Month special podcast episodes this month. They're going to keep coming. I'm so excited to share them with you. Keep an eye out for the bonus podcast this month. Thank you so much, and see you next week.
Thank you for joining me this week for all the fun journeys and lessons learned on my big adventure called life. For more information on the different cities discussed, check out the blog posts on hieatexplorelove.com, posted every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. If you have any questions or fun stories to share, feel free to reach out at hieatexplorelove@gmail.com. Until next week, remember to eat well, explore the world, and love yourself. See you next time. This episode is produced, scripted, and edited by me, Ashley. Special thanks to Sarah Mientka.